campaigning for better access for European firms in China. And here is Grant Shapps now. Let's listen in.
Incident involving activity by a malign actor. In recent days, the Ministry of Defence has identified indications that a malign actor gained access to part of the Armed Forces payment network. This is an external system completely separate to the MOD's core network, and it's not connected to the main military HR system. The House will wish to note that it is operated by a contractor, and there is evidence of potential failings by them, which may have made it easier for the malign actor to gain entry. A specialist security review of the contractor and their operations is underway, and appropriate steps will be taken. The contractor-operated system in question is held and holds personal data of regular and reserve personnel and some recently retired veterans. This includes names and bank details, and in a smaller number of cases, addresses. In response to this incident, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we've undertaken significant and immediate action, enacting a multi-point response plan to support and protect our people. And I'd like to provide the House with details of this 8-point plan this afternoon. First of all, we've immediately taken the system offline, and this has secured it against similar future threats. Secondly, we've launched a full investigation, drawing on Cabinet Office support and specialist external expertise to examine the potential failings of the contractor and to minimise the risk of similar incidents in the future. 3, whilst our initial investigations have found no evidence that any data has been removed, as a precaution, we have today alerted those service personnel affected through the chain of command. In addition, we're also sending out letters to a small number of veterans who've retired and who may have been affected as an additional precaution. The House will wish to note the vast majority of the UK veterans community are, however, unaffected. 4, specialist advice and guidance on data security has been shared and will be available on Gov UK later today. 5th, we've additionally set up a helpline to support individuals. The number for the helpline is 01249 596 665, and that helpline will be available from today. 6, we're providing a commercial personal data protection service for all service personnel, and this facility will constantly monitor each individual's personal data and notify them if there are any irregularities. Even though we don't believe that their information has been stolen, we intend to do this in order to bring further peace of mind. 7, welfare and financial advice is available where needed through each individual's chain of command. And 8, on becoming aware of the incident, MOD stopped the processing of all payments and isolated the system. And I want to provide further detail on this particular step. We're making changes to the system to ensure it is secure before recommencing payments through it, of course. And I can confirm, though, that in the meantime, all April salaries have been paid. Some service personnel will have experienced a slight delay in receiving some expense payments. However, we expect this to be fully resolved today with the money in their accounts by Friday. Furthermore, I can confirm that we are ensuring all high-value payments remain unaffected. For example, all outstanding Forces Help to Buy and terminal benefit payments have been facilitated by alternative secure transfer. As mentioned, salary payments and pensions for veterans have not been affected, and we do not expect them to be in the future. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for reasons of national security, we can't release further details of the suspected cyber activity behind this incident. However, I can confirm to the House that we do have indications that this was the suspected work of a malign actor, and we cannot rule out state involvement. This incident is further proof that the UK is facing rising and evolving threats, and as I set out in my speech in Lancaster House in January, the world is, I'm afraid, becoming somewhat more dangerous. Last month, the government therefore announced an increase in defence spending to meet these new threats, reaching 2.5% of GDP by the end of the decade. Mr. Deputy Speaker, following this incident, I can also announce today that although this incident is entirely unrelated to our own MOD networks, we are also reviewing all personnel data to ensure our people's data is secure.
You're watching BBC News, and UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps talking about a hack which has compromised the payroll system of the British Armed Forces.
We cannot at this stage rule out state involvement from elsewhere. This 8-point plan outlines the immediate and significant action we're taking to protect the most precious resource, our people. And even though this has occurred on a contractor system, with a malign actor involved, and we can't rule out that foreign state involvement, I want to apologise to the men and women who are affected by this. It should not have happened, and this 8-point plan seeks to ensure that it is put right and that it cannot happen again. I commend the statement to the House.
John Healey.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There is deep concern in this House about the grave security breach, and the House will...
UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps making that statement about a hack of the payroll system of the British Armed Forces. This is an external network operated by a contractor. He pointed out that a number of actions have been taken as a result, including taking that system offline, a full investigation. And he talked about a malign actor being behind this. He said we cannot rule out state involvement. Government officials have told the BBC that China was most likely responsible, something the Chinese Foreign Ministry has dismissed as absurd, although Mr. Shapps didn't mention China specifically there, rather a malign actor, and said we cannot rule out state involvement. The adult film star at the centre of Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York has taken the stand as a witness. Prosecutors say Stormy Daniels received $130,000 from the hands of Mr. Trump's former lawyer at his direction before the 2016 presidential election in order to keep quiet about her allegations that she had sex with the former president. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to falsifying business records and denies a sexual encounter with Ms. Daniels. Well, let's speak to our North America correspondent, Anita, who is following the trial for us. And Anita, bring us up to date with what Stormy Daniels has been saying.
Yeah, well, Stormy Daniels' testimony has certainly turned the case from documents and accounting to salacious details of her alleged affair with Donald Trump, which he denies. And Stormy Daniels started off by talking about her difficult upbringing and how she got into the adult film world. But now she is centered on that alleged sexual encounter with Donald Trump in 2006 after she met him at a celebrity golf tournament. And she says that she was approached by Donald Trump's bodyguard, asked to have dinner with Donald Trump, and she playfully cracked jokes a couple times, saying her initial response to that invitation was F no. But then she said her publicist urged her to attend that dinner, and when it got to the kind of exact details of the encounter in Donald Trump's hotel suite, that's where things got a bit tense. The judge warned prosecutors numerous times that they were going into just too much detail, and they warned prosecutors to move quickly along to the relevant information about that encounter. Donald Trump's team objecting continuously to Stormy Daniels providing information about how that all played out. So we've gotten to a moment that is certainly very tense in her testimony.
And Neda, we're seeing that Mr. Trump's lawyers are objecting to almost every question that the prosecutor is asking. So it sounds like the progress of what's happening today is a rather stop-start affair.
Yeah, it's a very delicate balance. I mean, remember, before Stormy Daniels started her testimony, the defense wanted to exclude any testimony about the alleged sexual acts. And prosecutors said that they would keep it brief, it wouldn't be too graphic, and the judge agreed that it was necessary to ask her about it just to establish her credibility as a witness. But the judge has now said that they are going into just too much detail. I mean, to give you a sense at what point Stormy Daniels started to detail what toiletries Donald Trump had in his hotel suite, what he was wearing, the kind of the questions he was asking during that sexual encounter. So certainly providing many details that the defense feels is not relevant to this case.
Okay, Neda, thank you very much for that update. Neda Tawfik there in New York. And a reminder that you can see all the latest on that trial and the new lines as they emerge from Stormy Daniels on the witness stand. And that is on our live page and the BBC app. You can keep right up to date there. Now, Israel's defense minister says Israel will continue its operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah until Hamas forces in the area are destroyed or the group hands over the Israeli hostages it still holds. Yoav Gallant's comments come as the United Nations said Israel isn't allowing humanitarian workers access to the Rafah crossing after Israeli defense forces took control of the Gaza side of the crossing with Egypt. These pictures have been issued by the IDF, which says its troops are carrying out what they call a limited operation in Rafah. It says it's killed several Hamas fighters and has destroyed a number of tunnels. Meanwhile, aid lorries are queuing up at the Rafah crossing, waiting to get into Gaza as the UN demands the crossings be reopened immediately. Yolande Nell has sent this report from Jerusalem.
Rolling into Rafah. Israeli tanks have now taken control of Gaza's key crossing into Egypt. The Israeli army says it's killed what it calls 20 Hamas terrorists and destroyed tunnels in a precise operation. But Palestinians mourning their lost loved ones say children were among those killed in the latest airstrikes. Mohammed Abu Amra has his family lined up in body bags.
My wife, my brother, my sister and niece were martyred. We did nothing. We were sleeping peacefully. We're not Hamas, nor any faction. I'm a construction worker.
What's happening in Rafah still falls short of the full-scale ground offensive that world powers have warned against in this city, crammed with displaced people. But there are new concerns that Israel has now closed the two main crossing points for aid to Gaza.
The Rafah crossing is now under control of the Israeli Defense Forces and is currently closed for the movement of goods and people in both directions. Kerem Shalom crossing is also closed, so that means that currently the two main arteries for getting aid into Gaza is currently choked off.
Last night, Gazans rejoiced after Hamas declared it had accepted a ceasefire proposal from mediators. But celebrations were short-lived as Israel said its core demands weren't met and that it would continue negotiations. Israelis supporting the hostages took to the streets, demanding a deal to bring them back. Relatives of those still held captive accused their Prime Minister of putting his own political survival ahead of their loved ones. Some went to Parliament today.
There are civilians there who need rescuing, soldiers who need rescuing. And so far, what I'm seeing is the state of Israel and Netanyahu are simply delaying.
Back in Rafah, Israel has again been ordering Palestinians to leave the east. After 7 months of war, an end had seemed tantalizingly close, but now there's more painful uncertainty.
That report from Yolande Nell. Well, let's go to Jerusalem Live now and speak to our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. Frank, what is the latest you're hearing about the situation on the ground there and also about the status of the negotiations to try to actually get a deal sorted?
Fighting and talking is what Israel seems to be doing all at the same time. So it's got a kind of two-pronged approach to this whole situation. It sent a mid-level delegation to Cairo, not to negotiate, we don't think, but more to study Hamas's proposals, find out what common ground there is, and there is still quite a lot of common ground, and then report back. And if they think there is a deal within reach, then a high-level delegation will be sent from Israel to Cairo, probably headed by David Barnea, the head of Mossad, but we're not at that point yet. Now, the fundamentals of the ceasefire deal are there and are basically agreed. It involves an initial 42-day period of calm, of ceasefire, during which there would be an exchange of hostages, 33 hostages out of Gaza, a larger number coming out of Israeli jails of released Palestinian prisoners, a movement north of displaced Palestinians back to their homes in northern Gaza. But the sticking point in that is over how this ends. What is the ceasefire going to be permanent? Hamas wants a full and final ceasefire. It doesn't want to sign up to something that they give up their key bargaining chip, which is the hostages, only to find they come under a massive assault the very next day. From the Israeli perspective, they don't want to sign up to a deal that leaves Hamas militarily intact. You know, this country is still reeling from the October the 7th massacres, and the government has vowed two things: to bring the hostages home and to destroy Hamas. If it leaves Hamas intact, the coalition will almost certainly fall apart because hardline right-wingers will simply walk away from it. So that puts Mr. Netanyahu in quite a difficult position. In terms of Rafah and the fighting there on the ground, the US, which is the main benefactor for Israel, has made it very clear it opposes a major military operation in Rafah. Why? Because you've got 1.4 million Palestinians crammed into an incredibly small space. Rafah is a city at the southern end of the Gaza Strip, but it's not big, and people are already living in dire conditions there. The last thing they need is combat taking place in the middle of it. At the moment, this is a limited operation, but it still involved the movement north of the best part of 100,000 Palestinians, and fighting is taking place. As you heard there, the two main crossing points for aid into the territory at Rafah and Kerem Shalom are currently shut. The one at Kerem Shalom is shut because Hamas rocketed it a few days ago. The one at Rafah is shut because Israel moved on it overnight, took over the Palestinian side of it, raised the Israeli flag and said, we're now in control of it. So fighting is ongoing there. Israel believes that military pressure on Hamas is the best way to get the hostages out. That's not what the hostage relatives and friends seem to think. Down the road from here in Tel Aviv, they demonstrate every night, smaller ones here in Jerusalem, saying, we want a deal now. Eksa akshav, they shout in Hebrew, deal now.
Frank, thank you very much. Frank Gardner in Jerusalem. And let's stay in Jerusalem. We can speak now to Noga Tarnopolsky, an independent journalist based in the city. Noga, thank you very much for joining us today on BBC News. And do you think Hamas agreeing to this ceasefire deal came as a surprise to the Israeli government?
It appeared to. It appeared that the Israeli government was basically bargaining on being able to tell the world, see, Hamas rejected the terms of this agreement. And Hamas instead came out and said, no, we accept it, although it's unclear what exactly are the terms that Hamas has accepted. It's unclear whether Israel has seen the agreement that Hamas now say it accepts. The Israeli government says it wasn't, and all but accused the mediators, the Egyptians, the Qataris, and even the Americans of some sort of dirty trick yesterday, implying that they had offered Hamas a softened version of a deal compared to the one Israel had accepted a few weeks ago in Paris.
What do people there in Israel think about the government's aims to both bring the hostages home while at the same time not leaving Hamas militarily intact? Do they think both of those things are possible?
Well, I don't know is the real answer, but I think Israelis are very confused and would like both of those aims to be achieved. But a very interesting poll published today by the Israel Democracy Institute, that's a nonpartisan think tank, showed that 62% of Israeli adults believe that returning the hostages home is a more important aim than continuing the war against Hamas in Gaza. So that gives you an indication that a majority, at least, is putting the emphasis on getting the hostages back. I have to say that behind that opinion is a reality that nobody knows how many of the hostages remain alive. Officially, there are more than 100 still being held. It's my understanding that the Americans think that not more than 50 are alive. Hamas today, in one of its many messages, said that it did not have 33 hostages, alive hostages, that it could release in the first phase of this. So the families are desperate and fighting on the streets, but it's unclear whether, even if this succeeds, they're going to get living or dead hostages back.
Noga, briefly, if you would, so you're talking there about public opinion. What about the opinion of President Biden? Do you think that's going to hold much sway with President Netanyahu right now?
Prime Minister Netanyahu appears unswayed.
Prime Minister, I beg your pardon, yes.
No problem at all. Prime Minister Netanyahu appears to be equally unswayed by the majority of Israelis, a clear majority that want this deal done, and President Biden and other allies of Israel, including Prime Minister Sunak, the President of France, and others who are pushing him very, very hard. Thus far, at every opportunity, Prime Minister Netanyahu has chosen the opinions of the most extremist of his ministers above the opinions of a majority of Israelis and all of Israel's international allies.
Noga Tonopolsky, thank you very much for your thoughts on this story today. And you can follow all the latest on what's happening in Gaza, the situation on the ground and the response in Israel on the BBC News app and website. We've got a live page there with all the developments for you as they happen. And around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. President Vladimir Putin has been sworn in for a new 6-year term at a ceremony at the Kremlin. Putin, who's been in power as president or prime minister since 1999, now begins his new mandate more than 2 years after he sent tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine. In March, Vladimir Putin won a landslide victory in a tightly controlled election from which 2 anti-war candidates were barred on technical grounds. Britain, Canada and most European Union nations decided to boycott the swearing-in, but France said it would send its ambassador. Meanwhile, Ukrainian intelligence says it's foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Zelensky. It's arrested 2 colonels from the government protection unit suspected of passing on secret information to a Russian FSB cell. The assassination, according to the statement, was to be timed for President Putin's inauguration as a present. Let's get more on this with our Kyiv correspondent, James Waterhouse.
Yes, this was quite a plot that was allegedly uncovered by the intelligence service of Ukraine. We had footage released appearing to show 2 men, 2 serving colonels in the country's security service, which is responsible for keeping officials safe, being arrested, and they are accused of being hired by the FSB, Russia's own security service, as moles before the full-scale invasion, where they met their Russian handlers in neighbouring European countries, we're told, where cash was exchanged. And the investigators here released recordings of apparent phone calls between them and their handler, where they talked about both trying to convince security guards close to President Zelensky and other top officials to both take them hostage and later murder them. He talked about, investigators talked about alleged plans to leak details of where these VIPs would be travelling, as well as addresses they'd be staying, where they would then be hit by missiles. And the men are also accused of carrying large amounts of weaponry from Ukrainian regions to Kiev, including mines, explosives and drones. So these really are quite the tally of accusations facing these two colonels. And you know what the intelligence service are keen to stress is that they've been on top of this. They've been monitoring them throughout. We don't know to what extent they infiltrated the security service and how close they got to this alleged plot. But if they are found guilty in a subsequent trial, they face life in prison.
And James, there have been a number of attempts on President Zelensky's life, of course, or plots on his life. How does this one measure up compared to others?
Well, it's certainly on the extravagant side. I think there is, you know, it's obviously an interesting tale, isn't it, where you talk about an infiltration of this nature and just how brazen it sounds in terms of this allegation. There are instances in the past where you have the more extreme, where you have Russian paratroopers landing in the early hours of this invasion towards the presidential palace, not far from where I am now, where they were trying to take out President Zelensky, and where Ukraine's leader turned down offers to leave as invading forces moved in. Then there are tales of endless tales of Russian collaborators, which is something the security service constantly grapples with, where you have individuals sympathetic to the Russians who leak sensitive details, and the penalties they face are steep. But this is something that really goes to the heart of the security apparatus of Ukraine, and it's also a reminder of the risks that President Zelensky takes. You know, this is a leader that doesn't shy away from public appearances. He travels the country, he goes to the front line, he goes to very hostile areas, and so you can be sure that there will be a thorough examination, you would imagine, by the security services to establish to what extent Russian agents may have infiltrated other parts of the Ukrainian state. It just shows that this is a war not just fought on the battlefield. There is an information war, and there is also this almost sort of infiltration war as well. So as far as the intelligence service is concerned, it was foiled, but we'd never know how close it got for President Zelensky.
James, thank you very much. James Waterhouse in Kyiv. A shooting has been reported at the home of the rapper Drake in Toronto. Police said a man was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Reports suggest he's a security guard. The suspect is thought to have fled the scene in a vehicle. The incident took place in the early hours of Tuesday morning, and police say it's too early to investigate a motive. Drake has recently been involved in a bitter feud with his fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar, who'd released a diss track accusing him of relationships with underage women. In his response, Drake angrily denied the accusations, saying they made him feel disgusted. It's fashion's biggest night. The Met Gala has been hosting an array of stars from film, music and television. A-listers were invited to branch out with the dress code, excuse the pun, the Garden of Time, inspired by a short story by J.G. Ballard. Zendaya, J.Lo, Chris Hemsworth and Bad Bunny joined Vogue's Anna Wintour as hosts. Tamsin O'Connor is the UK Fashion Features Director at Elle magazine, and she told me earlier her thoughts on last night's event.
I certainly enjoyed what was on offer on the red carpet last night. I think for me, Zendaya's outfit, her first outfit and then her outfit change, opening and closing the red carpet looks last night were pretty spectacular. She wore John Galliano for Maison Margiela to open and then close with another Galliano look that he designed for Givenchy in the 90s.
In a world which is dealing with so many crises, how does the Met Gala, these gorgeous costumes, how does that fit into it?
It is quite a tough time in the world right now, of course, but I think that the Met Gala does provide a platform for fashion escapism, really. It's a time to celebrate creativity and really just enjoy what is on offer. I think we saw that last night with a lot of designers really going to town with some of their very, very exciting and inventive takes on the theme for the Met Gala this year.
And why is this event so important in the fashion calendar? I feel like it's almost a bigger event than what people are wearing to the Oscars, for example.
Totally. Well, I guess it is the Oscars of the fashion world. The main purpose of the Met Gala is to raise funds for the Costume Institute, which is a really important fashion archive, but it's become a really important celebrity moment with some very, very key big names and an opportunity for fashion brands to really explore and experiment on the red carpet in a way that they can't do at other red carpet events because of the fashion nature of the theme and of the event.
Yeah, and we've seen quite a few pictures of some of the stars there. What about men's fashion? What caught your eye there?
I thought Josh O'Connor in his Loewe look was a really fun twist on the traditional black tie garb. There was quite a lot of exciting men's fashion. Lil Nas X always does a very out there look. He actually kept it quite PC last night, quite toned down. We saw Jonathan Anderson, who is creative director of Loewe, in some very lovely sparkly shoes. Lots on offer.
And that was Tamsin O'Connor from Elle magazine talking to me earlier. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello there. Despite some cloud across northern areas, especially across Scotland, much of the country had a pretty decent day today with a good deal of sunshine around. It felt quite warm through the afternoon. That's how we're keeping things for the rest of this week. Always a bit more cloud across this northwest corner with some rain at times, particularly the north and west of Scotland. By far the bulk of the dry, sunny weather will be across England and Wales. There may be the odd isolated shower here and there, but most places will stay dry. In fact, a pretty good looking week coming up all in all, thanks to high pressure, which has been building in, killing off the showers, pushing away the weather fronts. It's left a legacy of cloud, though, and that's what we're going to see again across parts of the north of the UK, and also some sea fog, some mist and murk here and there across the North Sea coast in towards the Irish Sea as well, but generally dry for most with a few clear spells, temperatures 6 to 10 Celsius. High pressure then dominates the scenes, gets a bit stronger across the country, so I think we'll see fewer showers for England and Wales, but these weather fronts will bring thicker cloud, more of a breeze, outbreaks of rain to the northwest of the country. Most places starting dry, bit of mist and murk to start off with, plenty of sunshine, England and Wales, southern and eastern Scotland, Northern Ireland, then we'll start to see splashes of rain with increasing breeze across the north and west of Scotland into the afternoon. So 13, 14 degrees here, up to 20 for southern Scotland, 21 or 22 in the warmest spots in England and Wales. The winds generally light coming in from the south. Wednesday night, most places dry again with clear spells, variable cloud. Stays quite cloudy, breezy with outbreaks of rain across the northern half of Scotland through the night. And temperatures again 6 to around 10 degrees. So for Thursday then, I think we'll see more sunshine around across England and Wales. Bit of a cloudy start, then the sunshine really gets going. And I don't think there'll be any issues with showers whatsoever. Should stay completely dry. Bit more cloud for northern Scotland, the odd shower here, but southern Scotland, Northern Ireland doing pretty well. Temperatures 19 or 20 degrees here, 22 or 23 the warmest spots across England and Wales. High pressure continues to bring fine weather on Friday and into the weekend as well, but it starts to retreat towards the continent and allows low pressure to take over initially from the west as we head through the latter part of Sunday. So it could be quite warm Friday and certainly into the weekend across the south of the country. By the end of Sunday, we'll start to see a few showers, I think, pushing into western areas. Take care.
It's the first US presidential rematch in almost 70 years, with the polls suggesting it will be a tight race decided by narrow margins. Get the latest headlines in the BBC News app. Get in-depth coverage from this historic election campaign on bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story on the US election with BBC News.
I just felt this tightening in my stomach. Where do I need to go? How can I get there?
Rescuers are using their bare hands to search desperately for survivors.
In a lot of the stories that we tell, they can be so bleak. People here wonder if they can ever rebuild. You need to show some hope.
So this is what an exodus looks like. My coping mechanism at the time was to not think further than an hour ahead.
My job is investigating bad stuff that's on social media. I know by doing this interview and sharing it, I'll probably get more online abuse. My job is to expose how people are targeted because I'm a reporter who can do that.
At the end of the day, a proclamation of a new king is actually the moment to be looking forward. And that tempered the way that I covered the story.
Everyone ready for that proclamation of a new king. Hip, hip!
Behind the Stories. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
And this is BBC News, the headlines for you. John Swinney wins the nomination to be Scotland's First Minister. More than 800,000 children in England and Wales have spent the last year living in an abusive home, a new piece of research suggests. And we'll be looking at why England's largest lake, Windermere, turned bright green. Researchers think a high number of visitors could be to blame. Now, I just want to bring you some breaking news coming to us about TikTok and its Chinese parent company ByteDance, which have filed a lawsuit in a US federal court seeking to block a law signed by President Biden, which would force the sale of TikTok by its Chinese owners. The app is used by millions of people around the world, including 170 million Americans. The lawsuit says the sale of ByteDance, the sale of TikTok by ByteDance is simply not possible, not commercially, not technologically, and not legally. So TikTok's owners, the Chinese parent company ByteDance, has filed a lawsuit in the US seeking to block that law signed by President Biden. We'll have more on that story for you as we get more details. Right now, it's time for sport, and let's join Jane Dougal.
Hi there, Anita. We start with Nottingham Forest because their appeal against a 4-point deduction for breaking Premier League financial rules has been rejected. An independent commission had found Forest's losses in the 2022-23 season breached the threshold of £61 million, and that decision has been upheld. It means Forest remain 17th in the table and 3 points clear of the relegation zone with 2 games of the season remaining. Our sports correspondent Katie Gornall has been following the story.
They were found to have overspent their profit and sustainability limit of £61 million by £34.5 million. Now, usually Premier League clubs are allowed to lose £105 million over a rolling 3-year period, but because Nottingham Forest spent 2 of those years in the Championship, their limit was reduced accordingly. Now, they could have been handed a 6-point penalty at the time, but the Premier League gave them a less severe punishment because they took into account their early plea and cooperation. Still, though, Forest were not happy with that punishment. They said at the time that the spending restrictions on promoted clubs, they said, undermined the league's integrity and competitiveness. Now, today we find out that their appeal has been dismissed, the 4-point penalty stands, and although they haven't commented, I think they and Everton, who we know have also been subject to points deductions this season under PSR, will be feeling probably hard done by because these rules have proved so controversial and they are set to be replaced by new regulations in the 25-26 season.
Katie Cornell there. We will know one of the Champions League finalists later as Paris Saint-Germain meets Borussia Dortmund in the second leg of their semi-final. On Wednesday, the other semi-final will take place with Real Madrid and Bayern Munich meeting again with the scores level from the first leg. But before that, of course, Dortmund take a narrow 1-0 advantage over the French champions to the Parc des Princes tonight. PSG got the better of Dortmund at home when they met in the group stages, and European football expert Andy Brassell says it's something both sides will learn from.
PSG looked the part. You know, they really looked a true collective in their first Champions League game post Neymar and Messi, and they gave Borussia Dortmund a lesson. I guess in terms of going into this gives Dortmund a lot of not what to do because they were really poor back in September, way too passive. But of course, Kylian Mbappe struggled to get into the game a little bit in the first leg, certainly when he was at centre forward. So maybe that gives Luis Enrique food for thought. I think the way the club has managed him has left a bit to be desired this season. So, you know, whether they've put him in the best conditions to find rhythm, but I don't think there can be any greater pressure than what he puts on himself. You know, if he's given the conditions to succeed, he's always shown he's someone who can seize the big moment. And I don't see why this should be any different.
Cycling, and Britain's Geraint Thomas is in second place overall after stage 4 of the Giro d'Italia. It was a bad day, though, for Binyam Girmay. After finishing third yesterday, the Eritrean is out of the race after crashing twice in just a few minutes. Italy's Jonathan Milan was first over the line, with Thomas tucked inside the peloton. He's 46 seconds behind race leader Tadej Pogačar of Slovenia. Now, Barry Hearn, the president of Matchroom Sport and the former chairman of World Snooker Tour, has said Sheffield City Council will move heaven and earth to keep the World Snooker Championship in the city. The Crucible, which only holds 980 spectators, has hosted snooker's biggest event every year since 1977, with Kyron Wilson becoming the latest champion. He beat Jack Jones in last night's final. However, the Crucible's contract expires in 2027, and moving away from the iconic venue would be popular with some of the players who have previously criticised conditions at the theatre. More details on all of those stories on the BBC Sport website and app, but that's all the sport for now. Anita.
Jane, thank you very much. John Swinney will become Scotland's 7th First Minister after being nominated by Parliament. The SNP leader succeeds Humza Yousaf, who resigned from office earlier today. Mr Swinney's appointment will be rubber-stamped by the King before he is officially sworn in at the Court of Session on Wednesday. Addressing politicians at Holyrood, he called for unity and pledged to govern for everyone.
When I pitched up at Forrester High School in this city in 1979, at the age of 15 wearing my SNP badge, and my friends and teachers wondered why I had become involved in this fringe party, I could scarcely have imagined that my journey would involve becoming the First Minister of Scotland. It is an extraordinary privilege to hold this office, and I thank Parliament warmly for the honour that has been given to me. To the people of Scotland, I would say simply this: I offer myself to be the First Minister for everyone in Scotland. I am here to serve you. I will give everything I have to build the best future for our country.
And let's speak now to our Scotland correspondent, Lorna Gordon. Lorna, hello to you. John Swinney has been reflecting, hasn't he, about how having stood down from Cabinet last year, it was something of a surprise, he said, to be back as First Minister this year. So what are the key challenges facing him?
Yeah, he said he had done his bit. I think his main challenge will be trying to unite his party, trying to reach across the political divides, because he's now the leader of a minority government. He's actually, just as we speak, coming out for photographs on the steps of Bute House with his wife, Elizabeth Quigley. He acknowledged it hadn't been an easy decision for his family. Elizabeth Quigley suffers from MS, but he's waving for the cameras with her alongside him as we're speaking just now, offering that traditional photo opportunity. Of course, he has been a man who's been at the heart of government here in Scotland for much of the past 17 years, and at the heart of the SNP for much longer than that. One of the other challenges he will have as a result is trying to present himself as a new face with fresh ideas for government when he is so associated with the decisions of the past. The leaders of Scotland's opposition parties congratulated him on winning that election to the position of First Minister. He won by 64 votes to 57, but they also took it as an opportunity to attack his record in government. He acknowledged that at times he had played a part in creating the intensely polarised environment we've seen at Holyrood that I think it's fair to say has become more fractious in recent months and years. He conceded he'd shouted put-downs across the chamber, but he joked he was now a changed man and he wanted more cross-party collaboration. He wants to kind of dampen down the tone of the debate here in Scotland, not least because he has to, because he will need the support of those out with of the SNP to get his policies passed. And he said at the top of that list was eradicating child poverty.
Lorna, thank you very much. Lorna Gordon, our Scotland correspondent. New research shows that more than 800,000 children in England and Wales have spent the last year living in an abusive home. That's more than the number of children who started primary school this year, according to Foundations, a leading family research centre. It's launching a project to try to find the best way to support children and families experiencing domestic violence, as our social affairs editor Alison Holt reports.
This is an important time for Peter and Amy. Their 2-year-old daughter Rosie is thriving and they have another child due soon. Hard work and finding the right family support has transformed their lives, because when Amy was pregnant with Rosie, the couple's relationship was abusive. Peter describes his behaviour as controlling. We've protected their identities.
Bombarding my partner with texts and phone calls and you know, asking questions like, where are you, who are you with, what are you doing? And if that wasn't kept up with, then I would get quite angry.
It was really difficult because I would always be waiting by the phone and I'd be worried about doing certain things just in case I didn't answer the phone, in case it would upset him.
It would have been a toxic environment for Rosie. Instead, they worked with For Baby's Sake, a charity taking part in new research into what works for families. Councils fund part of their work. Over 2 years, separately and together, Peter and Amy will help to change things.
Now I'm prepared. Now I know what's expected of me. I know how to regulate my emotions. I know how to, you know, be the best dad and partner.
Here they say the families they see are having healthier babies, and in the last 6 months, 3/4 of those with a 1-year-old have had no police call-outs. But a lot of domestic violence programmes can't provide that sort of data. The difficulty is knowing which ones work. This new research programme is looking at different projects around the country that look promising, including this one, to try to answer that question. The head of the research organisation says it will mean stretched public money can be spent where it has most impact.
We're currently operating in the dark. We just don't know what works to support children affected by domestic abuse, which feels completely unacceptable given the scale of children who are affected.
And it's estimated 1 child in 5 experiences some form of domestic abuse. Andrew says For Baby's Sake helped him separate safely from his emotionally abusive partner. He now looks after their children. His advice is clear.
Seek help. Don't sit there thinking this is your destiny. Your destiny doesn't have to be that way. You can actually seek help, and there's someone out there which will listen.
The researchers say their 5-year project will need some government funding, but they maintain better evidence will transform services and lives. Alison Holt, BBC News.
And let's speak now to Lauren Seeger-Smith, CEO of the For Baby's Sake Trust, one of the charities you heard mentioned in Alison's report, which is being evaluated for the project. Lauren, thank you very much for joining us today. And why the focus on intervention when we're talking about babies, even when a mother is pregnant?
Well, we know that the first 1,001 days in our lives is really the most critical for our long-term development. And we also know that there's a really significant chance that domestic abuse can begin when there's a baby in the womb. So it's so important to intervene at that critical point in the lives of children.
Why a spike when a woman is pregnant?
I think there are multitudes of reasons for that. I think it's a really vulnerable time in any family's life. And I think what the research from Foundations highlights is we're not talking about an isolated problem here. We're talking about a public crisis. We know that 11% of babies by 9 months have grown up with experience of domestic abuse. And so I think so often this is hidden. It's not talked about. What happens in our relationships in our home goes undercover. So we desperately need this to be a mainstream conversation and to give families the support when they need it.
So you're focusing on really the earliest intervention possible, because what are the longer term impacts on children who grow up in a home where there is that atmosphere of violence and domestic abuse?
Well, again, what's often not talked about in terms of our parents, 70% of our parents have experienced 5 or more adverse childhood experiences. And so very sadly, what we find is if you've experienced domestic abuse as a child in your own home, other forms of abuse, addiction, it's very likely that you will struggle in your own relationships as you go up into adulthood. And so we know that domestic abuse has a profound impact on our mental health, our physical health, but also on our own relationships in adulthood. And that's why we're really here to break that cycle of domestic abuse.
And how do you decide when you know that you can break that cycle, when you can positively affect the track of a relationship, and when it's time to say to the person who is being abused in that relationship, you really should not be with this person?
It is so difficult and it's so personal, and that's why often people don't reach out for help. They're scared about what's going to happen. We know from research that often people want help for their partner, but they find it really difficult to get that help. What I would say is anybody watching this who's impacted by domestic abuse, who might be pregnant, who might have young children, who's really worried about their family, do seek help. If you're pregnant, talk to your midwife, or you can contact the National Domestic Abuse Helpline. But it's desperately important that you do ask for that help because you're not on your own.
And just to look at what sort of problems children present with if they've been in that situation around domestic violence from a very early age. You talked about a cycle of violence perhaps being repeated, but what sort of behaviours do children present with if they are in that sort of home?
Well, we take a trauma-informed approach to understanding domestic abuse, and we know that, experiencing any form of childhood trauma can have a profound impact on both children and on adults. And those that work on frontline services, social workers, midwives, health visitors, the police are all too aware of the impact that can have on children's behaviour. Teachers are very aware of that, how those children might be presenting in school, how they're feeling. And so it's so important that we really keep our eyes and ears open, that we're really mindful, those of us who are working in schools, that so many of our children will be experiencing domestic abuse in the home, and they will bring that into their behaviour within school.
Lauren, thank you very much for joining us today. Lauren Seagersmith from the For Baby's Sake Trust. Exam boards are telling social media companies they need to do more to shut down scam accounts claiming to sell GCSE and A-level papers. Some of the accounts charge hundreds of pounds, even though the papers they claim to sell are almost certainly fake. The Joint Council for Qualification says students are at risk of being conned. Our reporter Christian Johnson has been speaking to students about the impact it has on them.
There's no name, no face, it's just GCSE papers and whatever year.
And it's usually just like a picture, and then there's a caption on it which says like DM, so direct message for full exam paper, and that's when they'll ask you to pay for it.
Their language is very positive, but I think it's quite manipulative.
We're on about an hour, aren't we? As exam season fast approaches, GCSE and A-level students up and down the country are busy with last-minute revision. But on their phones, social media scammers lie in wait trying to trick them out of hundreds of pounds.
It makes me feel like sort of offended in a way, and kind of also a bit like, I don't know, like prey.
I mean, you look in the comments of these videos and it's quite sad because people actually believe them.
POV, English got leaked.
These are just some of the accounts in question. They claim to have access to leaked exam papers when, in actual fact, they're fake.
Actually, something that is coming up quite a lot and exam boards are really worried about are people who are claiming to leak the current exam papers for this year.
This school in Swindon isn't turning its back on the issue. Teachers are telling students about the scams so they know what to look out for.
There is no way the papers have been leaked. In all likelihood, the money that you send will just disappear, all right, and you won't have any greater knowledge and understanding of what's on the paper than anyone who hasn't had a look.
It's really reprehensible and really unacceptable. All the fastest moving, newest, most dynamic challenges schools face around keeping young people safe and keeping them content and happy are always to do with things online.
A simple search on TikTok or Instagram brings up dozens of these accounts. They promise access to leaked exam papers in practically every subject, and some are charging hundreds of pounds. BBC Analysis has found 41 accounts claiming to sell exam papers on TikTok. Over on Instagram, there were a further 25 scam accounts.
It can take some time for these accounts to be closed, and then
what we're seeing is that the same individual is opening up other accounts. It would be helpful if we can explore what else can we do to address this issue as quickly as possible to protect the interests of students.
Instagram says it doesn't allow the sale of exam papers and removes accounts brought to its attention. A TikTok spokesperson says its guidelines are clear that no account should try to defraud or scam users. And a word of warning to students. Ofqual, England's exam regulator, says any exams being sold online are almost certainly hoaxes, but anyone found trying to buy a paper could end up losing their qualifications. Christian Johnson, BBC News.
Windermere, England's largest lake, is turning bright green with blooming algae, and researchers think the number of visitors could be to blame. Campaigners are concerned that the blooms are caused by sewage discharges during these busy periods. Our environment correspondent Jonah Fisher has more.
Before swimming in Lake Windermere, it's best to check the water.
It looks really good, very clear.
I'm with Pete Kelly. He runs wild swimming trips across the Lake District.
There isn't a second level there, which means there's no poo in the water.
Is it cold?
Absolutely freezing.
Checks complete and well insulated, we head out into one of England's most beautiful natural wonders.
It's the most iconic lake in the country. It's the longest lake in England. You get that real big lake experience.
But Lake Windermere is, according to campaigners, in big trouble.
It's a bit cold, but it's beautifully clear out there in the water today. But it's not always like that. A combination of high nutrient levels and warm temperatures mean that, particularly in the summer, Lake Windermere has been turning green.
This was the same spot in the summer of 2022. It's called an algal bloom and can kill fish and even become toxic.
On the right-hand side here, we're beginning to see a build-up of chlorophyll happening.
Chlorophyll is what makes the water green, and research funded by the UK Space Agency looked at satellite images alongside mobile phone data, which helps calculate how many people were visiting.
We've seen within this that one of the factors that leads to blooming is having more people within the catchment area. So there's other factors as well, but human movement and population is something that we can draw out within this study that we've done.
So I'm taking you now to Langdale final treated effluent pipe.
So is sewage the link between visitor numbers and algal blooms? Campaigner Matt Staniek certainly thinks so.
The connection is more people here, more pressure on local infrastructure. And lo and behold, we say United Utilities and that starts happening.
So this is treated effluent?
This is treated sewage.
We put our camera in the water. This is what legal treated effluent looks like. 1.1 million litres can be discharged from this spot every day.
The big difference that we want to make as a campaign, it's not just the untreated that's causing the issue, it's also the treated sewage that comes from United Utilities. And the only way to protect Windermere, protect local businesses, protect the environment and the culture and the economy of the area is to stop putting it into the lake.
United Utilities said in a statement, "Our wastewater treatment works are sized to treat the sewage from maximum population numbers at peak times and use the highest treatment standards, including phosphorus removal and UV treatment to kill bacteria. There are solutions that will make our seas, rivers and lakes like Windermere cleaner. But they're expensive, and the water companies are very clear that it's customers who must pay for them through higher bills." Jonah Fisher, BBC News, in the Lake District.
The late 1940s saw the rise of tropical modernism, a style of architecture that took the simple, functional design of modernism and adapted it into cool, comfortable buildings for hot and humid climates. Well, as the world considers how to build more sustainably, there's growing interest in this climate-responsive design. Our reporter Ijeoma Ndokwe went to the Tropical Modernism exhibition at London's Victoria and Albert Museum to find out more.
Painted concrete, adjustable slats and brise soleil.
a few of the features that characterise tropical modernism. Developed from the late 1940s by British architects Jane Drew and Maxwell Fry, it took the simple look and functional design of modernism, but it was adapted to control the environment, providing inbuilt cooling. Christopher Turner curated this exhibition about tropical modernism at London's Victoria and Albert Museum.
I think we have really important lessons to learn from tropical modernism about how to work with rather than against climate when we build. And a lot of contemporary architects are interested in this history, interested in histories of alternative modernism, but also in the way that these buildings use science to create buildings that were comfortable.
Although tropical modernism was pioneered by British architects Jane Drew and Maxwell Fry during British colonial rule, it was championed as a symbol of modernity by Ghana's first Prime Minister Kwame Nkrumah, even after the country's independence. This film takes a look at how Ghana's first president, Kwame Nkrumah, used tropical modernism as a symbol.
Nkrumah saw the potential of architecture to unite a country, but also to propel it into its kind of future and to kind of acclaim its arrival on a global political stage.
The climate crisis highlights the relevance of tropical modernism, a style of architecture that responds to the environment. Some say it could provide a foundation for how to address rising temperatures, which a new generation of African architects can build on. Ijoma Ndukwe, BBC News, London.
Thanks for your company over the last few hours. I'm on X at Anita BBC if you want to get in touch about any of our stories today. Meantime, do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello there. Despite some cloud across northern areas, especially across Scotland, much of the country had a pretty decent day today with a good deal of sunshine around. It felt quite warm through the afternoon. That's how we're keeping things for the rest of this week. Always a bit more cloud across this northwest corner with some rain at times, particularly the north and west of Scotland. By far the bulk of the dry, sunny weather will be across England and Wales. There may be the odd isolated shower here and there, but most places will stay dry. In fact, a pretty good looking week coming up all in all. Thanks to high pressure, which has been building in, killing off the showers, pushing away the weather fronts. It's left a legacy of cloud, though, and that's what we're going to see again across parts of the north of the UK, and also some sea fog, some mist and murk here and there across the North Sea coast in towards the Irish Sea as well, but generally dry for most with a few clear spells, temperatures 6 to 10 Celsius. High pressure then dominates the scenes, gets a bit stronger across the country, so I think we'll see fewer showers for England and Wales, but these weather fronts will bring thicker cloud, more of a breeze, outbreaks of rain to the northwest of the country. Most places starting dry, bit of mist and murk to start off with, plenty of sunshine, England and Wales, southern and eastern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Then we'll start to see splashes of rain with increasing breeze across the north and west of Scotland into the afternoon. So 13, 14 degrees here, up to 20 for southern Scotland, 21 or 22 in the warmest spots in England and Wales. The winds generally light coming in from the south. Wednesday night, most places dry again with clear spells, variable cloud. Stays quite cloudy, breezy with outbreaks of rain across the northern half of Scotland through the night. And temperatures again 6 to around 10 degrees. So for Thursday then, I think we'll see more sunshine around across England and Wales. Bit of a cloudy start, then the sunshine really gets going. And I don't think there'll be any issues with showers whatsoever. Should stay completely dry. Bit more cloud for northern Scotland, the odd shower here, but southern Scotland, Northern Ireland doing pretty well. Temperatures 19 or 20 degrees here, 22 or 23 the warmest spots across England and Wales. High pressure continues to bring fine weather on Friday and into the weekend as well, but it starts to retreat towards the continent and allows low pressure to take over initially from the west as we head through the latter part of Sunday. So it could be quite warm Friday and certainly into the weekend across the south of the country. By the end of Sunday, we'll start to see a few showers, I think, pushing into western areas. Take care.
Get the BBC News app for breaking news live as it happens. Stay up to date with BBC News. Download the app.
Carbon credit schemes offer the world's biggest companies a way to help offset their carbon emissions. But can they help save the planet? Or are they full of hot air? Panorama. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Welcome to breakfast.
Thanks for joining us.
Hello. You're going to have a great time.
Remember, Kev, you aren't getting any younger.
Sun up, I think, in about 10 minutes' time.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You've been up there and looked down at us here. Right, let's go live to Westminster.
Today is going to be much colder than of late. We do want to hear your stories.
Oh, he does smell good, actually. Arnold Schwarzenegger, thank you very much.
Start your day the BBC Breakfast way on BBC One and iPlayer.
At 6, the woman at the centre of the Donald Trump hush money trial takes the stand. The porn star, Stormy Daniels, tells the court about their alleged sexual encounter almost 20 years ago.
She described her version of events in intricate detail, including finding Donald Trump in his hotel suite wearing black silk pajamas.
Also tonight, Prince Harry's back in Britain, but says the King won't have time to see him. The longest ever rail strikes roll on, with services being hit across the UK this week. Another 6 years in power, a lavish ceremony at the Kremlin as President Putin is sworn in for a record-breaking 5th term. And Eurovision favourites Croatia, as the first of the semi-finals takes place in Sweden tonight.
And coming up on BBC News, Nottingham Forest failed in their appeal against a 4-point deduction for breaking Premier League spending rules. They're just 3 points above the relegation places with 2 matches left.
Good evening. She is the woman at the centre of Donald Trump's hush money trial. The porn star, Stormy Daniels, has begun giving evidence in court in New York. The former US president denies having a sexual encounter with her or paying her more than $100,000 to keep quiet about it in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. Well, let's go straight to New York for the very latest. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, is there, and there has been plenty of detail today from Stormy Daniels.
Oh, there certainly has. The woman who Donald Trump paid $130,000 to keep quiet has been speaking out in great detail in court. Now, he, of course, vehemently denies having had any kind of sexual encounter with her. And just before she appeared, his lawyers were in the court trying to limit how much salacious detail could actually be heard in the court. And as she was giving evidence, they jumped up frequently to object to what she had to say. She, though, described in a lot of detail visiting Donald Trump in his hotel suite at a golf tournament in 2006 and ending up on the bed having sex with him. In so much detail, in fact, that even the judge had to tell her just to answer the questions. As Donald Trump heads to court, waving at the cameras, it looks much the same each day. But they're not the same. Today, he had to watch a woman who claims she had sex with him testify about it. He's accused of falsifying business records when he marked a hush money payment to her as legal expenses.
The legal expense that we paid was put down as legal expense. There's nothing else you could say. You don't have to put down anything, I guess. But we put down legal expense was legal expense. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Attorney?
Stormy Daniels was paid $130,000 by Mr. Trump to stop her going public with her claims of a sexual encounter shortly before the 2016 presidential election. The court was shown this photograph of them together as she described first meeting him at a golf tournament in 2006, the day she said they later had sex. It was at this golf course, she says, that Donald Trump sent his bodyguard to invite her to dinner. When she got to his hotel suite, she laughed at him for wearing black silk pajamas, while he dangled the possibility of her appearing on his TV show, The Apprentice. As the prosecution asked Ms. Daniels about having sex with Mr. Trump, she was frequently interrupted by objections from his lawyers. The judge appeared unhappy about the length of her answers and the level of detail she was describing. She said she started thinking about selling her story when she heard somebody else was planning to, saying, "I'd rather make the money than someone making money off of me." Earlier today, Mr. Trump posted on social media, "I've just recently been told who the witness is today. This is unprecedented. No time for lawyers to prepare. No judge has ever run a trial in such a biased and partisan way." He quickly deleted it. He's been warned by the judge he could be jailed if he continues to post about witnesses in this trial. Sarah Smith, BBC News, New York.
Prince Harry is back in Britain for a week, but will not be seeing the King. The Duke of Sussex is here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Invictus Games for wounded or sick veterans. He spoke at an event in London this afternoon. Our royal correspondent